Fling Podcast. Take a break from the season-long commitment and join us for a Friday fling as we give you the newest and hottest DFS deals, preview the DFS main slate, and take the dreadful walk of shame. Here are your hosts, Brandon and Eric.
Welcome. We are looking at the main slate, week 7, DFS slate over on DraftKings. I'm going to do a little cash game preview, breakdown of that slate, and then we are going to take a look at the Millie Maker and, our game plan this week for the Millie Maker. So let's take a look. All right. So, first kind of want to do a game by game breakdown now. Pretty low scoring slate, which is something we've seen. Just scores are down. They're down by about 22%. So that's something to keep in mind. The heavy game stacks, more times than not, are not what we're going to be looking to target. We're trying to take pieces from games. We're doing skinny stacks. So let's take a look at the overall slate. And then, there's maybe 2 or 3 games that we really want to target as far as from a stacking perspective. And other than that, we'll be taking pieces of games. But one of the games that I really like is Cleveland going against Baltimore. This game has a 45.5 point total. Lamar hasn't looked very good recently. He's been pretty high variant. He used to have a really good safe floor rushing the ball, but we just haven't seen it. So he's more of a GPP play, which is awesome because in tournaments, I love Lamar this week. He has really good upside, and some of the numbers that I'm looking at look really good from a projection standpoint. Baltimore projected about 174 yards on the ground and 232 yards and a 32-point team total. So I love Lamar this week. You can stack him with Andrews, obviously, potentially Bateman. And then on the Cleveland side, this looks to be a pretty competitive game. So I certainly like some bring back options of like Njoku and obviously Amari Cooper as well. So another game that I like, and this is, really a one-sided affair, and we've seen these before with Brady's Bucks, is going against Carolina. You have a 26-point team total. Carolina basically just given up on the season. So this is definitely not a game you would force a bring back. This is projected to be one-sided. I like Tampa. I like Brady, Godwin, Evans. Cade Otton is going to be very cheap. Leonard Fournette. And then obviously Tampa's D on Carolina's side. I don't like anybody. The next game I really do like as well, specifically Joe Burrow stacks, maybe a little bit of mixing in tournaments, but Burrow, Higgins, Chase. Got to target this side. This game does look to be pretty competitive overall, but there's just not a lot of scoring on an Atlanta side. So Atlanta is projected to score or to have a really good day running the ball. So Tyler Algier, he might be not the hottest play, but certainly a GPP play you could take some chances on, as that he was looking pretty good on the domination station from a fantasy points per dollar perspective. Now, probably one of the top 2-3 games that I really like is Dallas going against Detroit. This is a game on both sides. There's going to be, it looks very even and looks to hit the over. So this has a 49-point total. We are seeing the numbers that were projected a little over 50, and it just looks to be competitive, and we like that. We like back and forth affairs, specifically with poor defenses, like Detroit has. So we get Dak back, Lamb. Lamb's definitely going to be chalk. Gallup, the running backs project really well, and then hopefully we're getting Swift back, and obviously we have Amron and TJ Hawkinson on the other side. Giants and Jacksonville, don't really like anything from this game. Low scoring, low team totals. Travis Etienne, I might have a little bit of consideration, but that's about it. The Jaguar, and then obviously Saquon Barkley. The Jaguars, they do have some really good value wide receiver plays, so you can mix some of those into your tournament lineups. But from a stacking perspective, not a lot to like here. Now, Indy and Tennessee. Indy projects really, really well this week throwing the ball. So I definitely have some interest in Pittman, Alec Pierce, the tight ends. Tennessee is very susceptible to the tight ends. So it's a matter of which tight ends are going to work. So you're probably going to want to mix in, Granson and Woods and whatnot. On the other side, I think you could play Robert Woods from fantasy points per dollar. You could probably play him in, cash, maybe small tournaments, but I don't think he has enough upside, so really not going to be a GPP play for me. But I do love Henry this week, so Henry is obviously in play. Now, Green Bay and Washington, I don't really like a lot here. Pretty low game total. Green Bay just hasn't looked very good. Washington, they get Heineke this week. Who knows? It might be a boost, but not a whole lot that I want from this game, specifically with the running backs being in a timeshare now. And then New York Jets versus Denver, same thing. This game has a way low total. The projections are just low running, low passing. I just not a lot to like here. So this game's pretty much an avoid for me, except for the defenses. I think you could play both of the defenses. Now, Houston and Oakland, I do really like the Oakland side. Josh Jacobs, he looks great this week. He projects really well. And then I think you could play Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, and Foster Moreau. They project well just from a value perspective. But Jacobs definitely where I'm going in cash, and then, pivots to Devontae Adams in tournaments. Dameon Pierce, you could play him. Lovie Smith said he wants to get him 20 touches a game. I'm just not really high on it this week, mainly just because I think Las Vegas should really win this game pretty handedly. So we'll see. I think you could play Pierce in tournaments, but I'm definitely not going there cash. Now, the game that I like the most is Seattle and the Chargers. Seattle has that poor defense. The Chargers, this game has a 50.5 point total. So this has climbed a little bit. This is the highest one on the slate. The Chargers have a 27.75 team total. I love Herbert sacks this week. If Allen's back, it's harder to guess who, those receivers are to stack, but I would love Mike Williams, specifically if Keenan Allen is out, and Everett. They're both good. Obviously, Eckler's in play. And on the other side, you can certainly play Kenneth Walker. He looked great. I will be playing him in cash. And then I like DK Metcalf with Lockett, kind of questionable. And DK he projects really well this week. So been playing a lot of Lockett this year, but I certainly would switch over to DK for this game. I love him as a bring back option. Now, Kansas City, this is another really good game that I like. One of the 3-4 games that I want to target. Kansas City going against San Fran. Mahomes, I think he's going to smash this week. San Francisco has a lot of injuries on defense. So Mahomes is in a great spot. Obviously, you can always, if you're playing Mahomes, you have to play Kelsey with him in sacks, because if Mahomes gets their tournament winning upside, Kelsey always does too. So certainly love Mahomes. On the other side, I don't know as much. I liked the passing options a little more before they got Christian McCaffrey in the trade. They're saying, hey, they might use him at the goal line. So we'll see. Debo, Kittle, and Ayuk are all in play as far as the running backs. I'm not touching that. You can't play Christian McCaffrey if he's not getting a full workload. And obviously with Christian McCaffrey there, you can't play Wilson now either. So now let's take a look real quick at the chalkboard. So this is very much my cash process. I look at the chalkboard and I'm kind of pieced together my lineup more or less on here. So probably where I'm going this week in cash, I'm definitely playing Josh Jacobs. I love Kenneth Walker. I don't think you could play Jacobs, Walker, and Eckler unless you really pay down at quarterback. And, I had settled in on Mahomes earlier in the week, but I'm just not seeing there as far as total ownership. So I'm probably going with Burrow at 6,900. He is in a great matchup. They project really well. We got, let me look at the numbers here. Yeah, we got Cincy for about 300 yards passing. So, if they pass for 300 yards, Burrow's having a good day. I certainly like that. He's projected as a top on quarterback. So, you can go Burrow. I think Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, and you can go Fournette. I think the other option is maybe play Barkley over Fournette. I'm not that's probably where I'm going. I'm not entirely sure, but that's probably where I'm going. And then I do like CD Lamb at 6,800, as opposed to playing Lockett this week. I'm probably going to go down because I'm a little worried about Lockett playing, with a hamstring injury and just re-aggravating it if he is active. So I like CD Lamb and T Higgins, and then I think you could play Higgins or Godwin. Really, it just more likely to go Lamb, Higgins, and then I would probably go down to Hunter Renfrow seems to be the value play. And then at tight end, I like the punt options. You got Moreau. I probably won't play Moreau because it's just too many Raiders. I'm not trying to play 3 Raiders, but Dolchich, rookie quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, they like to target tight ends. Dolchich looked great last week. He's stone cold minimum right now. He is projecting as a chalk, so I think that's where I'll go at tight end. And then I do think you could play the Jets going against Rippon. He gets a start over Russell Wilson. They're projecting really well. The defense is much better. Last time Rippon started, it was actually against the Jets, and he threw 3 picks. So if he does that again, you certainly will love that. So probably where I'm going to go in cash this week. Let's go ahead and take a look at the domination station, though, real quick. And, this is kind of what I do. If you're a DFS Army subscriber, you know about it. If not, use code FANTASYFLING for 10% off a VIP subscription. I do this every week to build my tournament lineups. You can set a lot of different rules, such as, salary cap. Not salary cap, but projected ownership max. Like for large field GPPs, I'd set it like 100, 110%. You could build 150 lineups, disallow more than one pass catcher without the tight end. So this really helps simplify your process. You can exclude like running backs or tight ends from the flex, all sorts of things. And then you could build a bunch of rules like, I only want Mahomes stacked with Kelsey type stuff. Or I only want Lamar Jackson stacked with Andrews if you're stacking with anybody, things like that. I don't want, a bring back. Don't force a bring back like for the Bucks game, for example, because it's going to be so one-sided. So 0 players from the other side type stuff. And then a big part of it is seeing the projections, seeing the ownership, and, how you maybe want to leverage ownership. So if you're looking to get different and you're like, the Packers, they actually project pretty well this week, 122 rushing yards. Aaron Jones is less than 3% owned. I'm going to do some Aaron Jones lineups, so I could set minimum exposures to Aaron Jones, like 30%. If I'm heavy on Aaron Jones this week, so on and so forth. And then the fantasy points per dollar. This is really how I build a lot of my lineups, specifically for cash games. Who's popping? Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker. These are where I would go right off the bat. And then you do the same thing for quarterbacks, trying to find value. Daniel Jones, Geno, so on and so forth. More so for quarterbacks, I want quarterbacks that are projected as winners in winning games. But, wide receiver, tight end, I am looking for top fantasy points per dollar. So this shows projections. Obviously, you're just going to kind of follow the numbers. Guys that are projecting well that we like this week, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, both over 16 points. Godwin, of course. CD Lamb, he's our cash play. And then specifically at tight end and defense, this is pretty much how I build my cash lineup every single week because these are high variance positions. So I'm looking for the most value. I'm looking for punt options. Dolchich, Foster Moreau, K. Dotton. These guys are all in play. They all project as the top 3 fantasy points per dollar plays. And certainly where I would go at tight end this week. And then defense. We just talked about it. The Jets, the Browns, they're projecting really well. And obviously the Bucks, which is crazy because they're 3,900, right? So they're projected to score a lot. And, this is the type of thing where 11 points is probably a very conservative projection just because defense is so high variant. You could potentially get 20 plus points out of them. And if you do, that's tournament winning upside. So got to have some exposure to Bucks and tournaments. But speaking of tournaments, that's what we're going to focus on next. Now, The making a milli portion of this program. So this is something I read up every week at DFS Army. As I went over last year, and you do this every week, is I take a look back at the milli maker because we're trying to find trends and see where things are going. And it really helps you build lineups that are positive EV. So if you see, for example, that you just don't see running backs or wide receivers above 9K in most lineups, which we haven't seen it at all in 2022, and we saw it rarely in 2021. It's a positive EV decision over the long run to not put 9K players into your lineup. So that is just an example of the reason why we review these trends. So last week, kind of as I'm alluding to here, you had a lineup of pretty low price players, as we pretty much do every week. You may get some guys in the 7K range, but you're not going to have above 8 to 9K, specifically running back and wide receiver. So, and kind of as I alluded to with the scoring being down, we are seeing smaller stacks. We're not seeing, like we saw in 2021, we're not seeing a ton of heavy stacks. Now, there is that one game that'll go off, like you had when Seattle and Detroit went off, and there's a bunch of players, or Baltimore and Miami, but most weeks, more times than not, you will see skinnier stacks, as we did this past week. So Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and then there's a bring back with Alvin Kamara. Now, even though there was a, just quarterback, pass catcher plus a bring back, the bring back actually wasn't necessary in this because Kamara really didn't have a good game, and there were lower priced running backs who did better. So this was used for correlation purposes, but it wasn't necessarily needed this week. So total stacking points, you got 89 points. And then you really had a 3-player average of about 29 and a half. And so, scoring's down. This is what we can expect. Now, as far as ownership, this was super contrarian, which is quite surprising because in the Ramondre Stevenson, Benjamin, Kenneth Walker week, Darrell Henderson, all this running back chalk. Normally what we see more times than not is a big influx in total ownership. This week, we did not see that. In fact, what we saw was the contrarian build. So Joe Burrow was a fantastic stack with Jamar Chase. I love Jamar Chase this past week. Unfortunately, I didn't have Joe Burrow stack. So even though it ended up being a profitable day, if you had Joe Burrow, that is really how you had the tournament winning upside. So Joe Burrow, 4%. He was the top leverage play, stacked with Jamar Chase at 14%. And then Alvin Kamara, kind of chalky, but not really, based on, Eno Benjamin was like 35%, 39%, 40 plus. So was Ramondre Stevenson. So, and I think scheme of things, he wasn't. Neither was Deion Jackson. This was late value that opened up. Sharp play. He just looked a lot better than Phillip Lindsay when you saw him play the prior week. And then this was very smart, taking just a piece from the Kansas City game, the right piece, Juju, 4%. And then just some really good one-offs. Jalen Waddle, 3% owned. Brandon Ayuk, 2% owned. Robert Tonyan, 2% owned. And then Cardinals D, 0.5%. So 54%, which is pretty wild because the average on the season was like 95%. So this really brought it down quite a bit. And, as far as leverage plays, we kind of went over this. Joe Burrow being the top leverage plays. He was the top scoring quarterback, and he was quite a bit cheaper than Josh Allen and less owned. Less of the field was on him. So some really good leverage plays here. And then pricing. As I mentioned, look at this. Joe Burrow, he was the second highest priced guy. So Jamar Chase, still under that 8 to 9K range, which you rarely see for running backs or wide receivers, but he was the highest priced guy. Joe Burrow, 6,700. Kamara, 6,700. Deion Jackson, 52. Juju, 52. Jalen Waddle. So really cheap guys like Tonyan, 3,600. Juju, Deion at 5,200. And then Brandon Ayuk at 5,400. They were the low price guys, so you were able to keep the overall lineup very much down. Now, last thing is ceiling. After 6 weeks, we have a low score in the Millie Maker at this point. So we've had multiple weeks over 250. In fact, 2 out of the first 3 weeks to start the season, we had 251 and 284. But then we've had weeks of 210, 244, and now 224. So our average is 244, which is right where it was in 2020. And in 2021, it declined to 233. So where we're headed right now is more closer to what we saw in 2021. So, when we think about that, if scores are going to be down, what we really want is we're taking small pieces from games. You may take a good wide receiver here, a good running back from that game, maybe take a quarterback and a pass catcher from that game, but you're not forcing to bring back. So it's something to think as we continue to build our lineups for the Millie Maker. All right, we got a comment here. Let's see. Full PPR, trade away Rashad Bateman and AJ Dillon. Receive Keenan Allen. I don't really like that trade, and the reason being is Keenan Allen already has a hamstring issue, and he hasn't played since week 1, and hamstring issues tend to linger. And if he can get a 2-for-1, Bateman's supposed to be back this week. He's Lamar's top option. And then you get AJ Dillon, who already, has every week value, but if Aaron Jones goes down, he could potentially be a league winner. So I would just keep AJ Dillon, Rashad Bateman. Keenan Allen, overall, like he has a decent floor, but he doesn't have a really high ceiling. I think your ceiling is higher with Rashad Bateman and AJ Dillon. So that is where I would go. Thank you for the question. Thank you for watching the show. Let's go into some of the plays that I like this week on DraftKings. And then I'm just going to make a quick lineup. So stack studs and sleepers. Some of the quarterbacks that I really like to stack this week. Lamar Jackson, as we talked about, he's coming in at under 10% ownership. I really like him. Joe Burrow and Chase Higgins. I like both of those stacks. The good thing with quarterback ownership is it's normally flat, so it normally never gets too high. So you can oftentimes get different with the wide receivers. So I really like that. And then Justin Herbert, 7,200. He projects really well, the highest game total on the slate. And, he's under 10% owned. So I really like Herbert this week. Specifically if Keenan Allen is out, the stacking pieces are pretty obvious. It's Mike Williams, it's Everett, maybe to a lesser degree Carter. But if Keenan Allen's in the lineup, it's much harder to predict. So if you do Herbert stacks, you're really going to have to attack it from several ways. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, so on and so forth. It's and maybe even you just avoid the wide receiver and you just go to the tight end, because certainly Herbert can get there, and Everett's pretty cheap. So Brady and Dak. Someone's knocking on the door. Sorry. So I like Dak this week. I think you could do CeeDee Lamb. You could do Michael Gallup for sure. Dalton Schultz. I really love Dalton Schultz this week. So you can go a lot of different ways with the stack, even Noah Brown. And then you have bring back options. I wouldn't get crazy with the bring back in, the stacks, but I do think if you do like a Dak to CeeDee Lamb, you can bring it back with Swift, for example, or Amron. So you can go a few different ways. And then with Brady, I would just team stack it. Brady to Evans, Brady to Godwin. You could certainly do K. Dotton, but there's no way I'm bringing a bring back in that game. Now, as far as some of the studs that I like, specifically at running back, I certainly love Eckler. He's quite chalky this week. I would total fade Josh Jacobs in large field GPPs, and on the other side of that game, just direct leverage. Go with Devontae Adams, 10% ownership. That is an obvious fade for me for Jacobs, and to get direct leverage and large field GPPs like the Millie Maker. Running back, obviously, I love Henry this week, 13% owned. Certainly take some shots there. And then on the other side of that game, you can always play JT. You always have to have a little bit of exposure. They don't project really well this week. That's why it is so low. But certainly we take some shots. And then I mentioned recently DeAndre Swift, 5% owned. Yeah, I definitely want some opportunities there with Swift at 6,800 and 5% owned. I do like Tony Pollard, more of a sleeper play this week. The Cowboys, they project really well. A lot of rushing yards. I was looking at 166. And Pollard just looks better than Zeke, and he's lower priced. So I certainly would take some shots with Pollard, especially as a receiving back. You can get a little silly with it, and you could even stack him being so low price and low owned with Dak. And it wouldn't be too crazy as a receiving back. We've certainly seen crazier things happen. From the wide receiver standpoint on my studs, obviously like Jamar Chase. Amron, I said, you could certainly have him in that stack. Dallas game is a bring back. I like DK Metcalf this week with Lockett being a little banged up. Lockett might just be out there, and DK might be getting the majority of the looks. So, and then T. Higgins, the target share has been there. He's due for a big week. It's gonna happen. He's getting a lot of targets. So I like T. Higgins this week in Burrow stacks. And then Mike Williams. This is low ownership. High projected game, specifically if Keenan Allen's out, jam Mike Williams in all day. Now, tight end, I do think you can go. Obviously, you need to have Mark Andrews, but I'm playing Mark Andrews in Lamar stacks. And then Travis Kelce, too, with Mahomes. He's coming in low on this week. And it's probably because he's priced all the way up. He's 8,000. But if no one's going to be on Kelce and Mahomes projects really well, I can get different elsewhere. I will do that. Now, some of my studs and sleepers that I like. So we'll just do from a projected ownership standpoint, and then we'll just scroll down the list. Travis Etienne has looked really good going against the Giants this week. He's looked very explosive. His big days are coming. I certainly would play him. He's only 5,400 and low owned. I like that as a sleeper play. Kenyon Drake, he looked great last week. Now Justice Hill is going to be in the backfield. Gus Edwards. So, probably a total avoid, but if you're looking to if you're looking to embrace the questionable backfield of the Baltimore Ravens, that, oh, by the way, they project really well this week, 174 rushing yards, you could certainly take some shots there. Devonta Foreman, he's only 4,000. It's a horrible matchup, but as a one-off, yeah, I could see it. 4,000. He gets in the end zone twice. He could hit 4x the salary pretty easy, which is what you need. And then we talked about Tyler Algier. He projected pretty well this week, and they are projected to run the ball a lot, 167 yards. So 2% ownership. Yeah, I will certainly take some shots there. Now, as far as wide receivers, and then we'll take a look at tight ends real quick. I like MVS this week, under 5% ownership. Allen Lazard. He does project pretty well against Washington, even though it's more of a low-scoring game. Allen Lazard can certainly get there. Juju, I think, play MVS and Juju. You never know. It's just one week, one could go off. The other week, another can go off. I liked Brandon Ayuk this week going against Kansas City because he got a lot of targets last week, and they project to be in a negative game script, throwing the ball. I think Ayuk projects quite well this week, and you can certainly take some chances. Alec Pierce, 4,600. The Colts project to throw the ball a lot of receiving yards, a lot of passing yards, about over 300. He's low owned. He's cheap. He's been getting quite a few targets in the offense past several weeks. So I like Pierce. And that's probably going to do it for wide receivers. Now, as far as tight ends, round this out here. George Kittle has got a lot of targets recently. His snap share and target share has been way up. He's coming in low on now. Just looks in a great matchup. this week. So 5,300 kind of feels like a 2 tight end week. I'm not opposed to flexing them, especially with some values, K Ottens of the world and whatnot. 7%. He's almost stone cold minimum 2,700. Gerald Everett's, he especially if Keenan Allen's out, I do like Gerald Everett as well. In Herbert stacks at only 4,000 and 6% ownership. And then Dalton Schultz is a guy that I really like this week. He is very underpriced. Dak targeted him a lot. So Dak's back, 5% owned, 3,600. You have to play him this week. So I think that's going to do it for our DraftKings preview. Both cash games and the Millie Maker. I hope y'all make some monies this week, and be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and share, and we will see you all next week. Thank you for joining. Take care.